All right, today on Heavy Metal Frequency, I'm concluding my series on 80s King Crimson with Three of a Perfect Pair. The third and dichotomously most and least accessible. I think this is more accessible in some way than Beat. King Crimson album. The first half is the accessible, and it's songs like Three of a Perfect Pair, which is this really nice, like, new prog rock new wave song. Model Man is really cool too. A lot of the first half of the album is this really catchy, like prog rock new wave music that's really, really neat. Man with an Open Heart. And then you get about halfway through the album and it's the Inaccessible, which is the harder stuff. Not necessarily metal, but up until some of their later things is about as metal as King Crimson got to an extent. So there are some really strange songs on here like Dig Me, which some of their harder stuff on Three of a Perfect Pair takes a lot longer to compartmentalize, as I like to say, and it takes a while to wrap your head around it. The third part of Lark's Tongue and Aspic, which is Lark's Tongue and Aspic Part 3, there's also a King Crimson Barbershop song on here, which is amazing. It's really, really cool. The industrial songs at the end of the album, Industrial Zone A, B, and C, are really, really neat. It's some of their harder material as well. This is a really fantastic album, and I've been poring over this, and with some of these albums, I like to conclude the review really quickly because there's so much here that even if I went over everything on here, like one thing, Dig Me is almost like has one of the most impressively amazing structures I've ever seen in a song. It starts as a really inaccessible industrial song, then it goes into a really catchy part, then it goes back into industrial stuff. It's a really extreme version of the song format ABA, or in some other aspects ABA, but it's a very ABA song. Man with an Open Heart is really cool. The post-punk elements really shine through on here, as do the new wave elements. There's just so much on here that's very, very easy to get through. Some of the songs you can get through it really easily. Some of them it takes a long time. You can sit there and listen to it over and over again. And I will leave you with, this is a fantastic album. It's a remarkable dichotomy in that you can look at this as a really cool new prog album that has some really pseudo metal heavy industrial nuances, or an industrial album that also works really well with new prog and new wave elements and things like that as well. And also the post-punk elements on this, like the Joy Division-esque Publicist. Publicist didn't exist at the time of this, but worked really well. And so this album is another thing, this album is mostly around the human voice and the structures of the songs themselves, rather than anything like, from my perspective, rather than anything like, it's not as based around guitar parts and stuff to an extent, and some things. Sleepless has a fantastic bass tone. Tony Levin's bass tone on here is fantastic. The funk parts it just carries the whole song. You could take everything out of Sleepless and just have the funkiness, and it would still be amazing. Like an isolated version of Sleep, like an isolated bass track version of Sleep. But I just suggest you really spend a lot of time with this, put on some coffee, really go over it, or you can take it at face value and move on with your life. I did not do that. So, thank you, and please enjoy this. And this concludes my series on King Crimson. I hope you've enjoyed me going over the 80s albums. And next this is actually kicking off a series of really weird stuff for me. And so it's going to be more really strange avant-garde-ish albums coming up soon. Thank you.